All right. Welcome to another episode of The Close Up. I'm your host, Stephen Cameron, a part of the Orlando Magic HQ. It's exciting. This is a very exciting week right now. The Magic are on a 6-0 run. They're sitting 9-6, third place in the Eastern Conference, which is really fun right now. They've held their last 6 opponents to under 100 points, which is kind of unheard of in this current day and age where offense is so glorified. And, you know, the rules and the reffing kind of allows offense to score more points, and the Magic are just like stifling people. It's pretty incredible. There's been a lot of stats that have been coming out just talking about how effective some of the Magic players have been on the defensive side, which has been a lot of fun. Yeah, the Magic are on a road trip right now. They just played the Phoenix Suns last night. We recorded this episode on Tuesday, November 19th. So on the 18th, they played the Phoenix Suns, beating them 109-99. And then they play tomorrow and Thursday, they play the Lakers and the Clippers on a back-to-back before heading back home to verse the Detroit Pistons. So the Magic are here. They're in it. It's fun. They've kind of found their groove back again. Offensively, Franz is balling. Mo Wagner in the second unit, he's been balling. Jalen Suggs doing what he needs to get it done. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope kind of starting to find his shot back. The last 3 games, he shot 38% from 3, which is really nice. So I'm hoping that's a nice start to him getting back to his career averages and just staying a little bit more consistent from deep, which is great. Steve Cerruti of The Ringer joins me. We have a great conversation about a lot of this stuff. You know, Steve is in touch often with talking with guys like Ryan Russillo and Bill Simmons and all the guys over on The Ringer staff. He's kind of like the go-to guy for Orlando Magic content. And he also does a lot of other content. He's deep into the soccer content that they produce and things like that. So we have a really good conversation. He's been on the show a few times, and it's always good to have him back. So I hope you all enjoy this episode and this conversation that we have. Before we get into the episode, though, I want to remind you all of a few things, all right? BetOnline is a sponsor of this show and a sponsor of our programming. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, MLB playoffs, NHL, and NBA, and political props, you can do just about anything you want on BetOnline. I've been getting a little bit back into sports betting myself recently. I just had a four-leg parlay hit last night, which was pretty fun. I did a $3 bet on a 4-leg parlay, and it gave me like $22 at the end. That was super fun. So you can do all that kind of stuff on BetOnline. When the game's over, head over to the online casino, and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of the 150 different slot machines that they have. Head over to the website today or the app. They have a great app, and get in on the action with America's number one trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. The other thing I want to remind you all to do is like and subscribe. If you haven't done that, go ahead and do that now. I know a lot of you watch this content and are not subscribed. Please do that. We would really appreciate it. The next partnership I want to talk about is Brandon Kravitz, our good friend. He's awesome. We really appreciate him. Catch Brandon Kravitz on In the Zone 5 days a week, talking about all the hottest sports topics in Orlando and beyond, live on 96.9 The Game and iHeartRadio. Also, if you are looking for more Magic coverage, Brandon will be hosting an extension of his show on game days. It's In the Zone Game Day Magic from 6 to 6:30 p.m. every weekday that the Magic play a game. And if that's not enough, catch bonus content and exclusive interviews about the Magic, sports betting, fantasy, and more on Zoneheads podcast. Download and subscribe to that wherever you are currently listening to this now. All right, that's going to wrap up this intro. Really excited about this conversation with Steve Cerruti. I hope you guys enjoy it. Go Magic. All right, everyone. Like I said, we got Steve Cerruti of The Ringer joining us today. You've heard him on the show before. You've heard him on a few other podcasts. I'm sure you've even heard him on The Ringer as the Ringer's Magic specialist voice who comes in as a pitch hitter for Bill Simmons and a bunch of the other shows. Steve, welcome to the show. Welcome back. Thanks for joining. I got a question to start this off.
Yeah.
Magic started hot. We were the topic, Paulo dropping 50. It was awesome. We were having some nice coverage around the media. It was great. Then we looked like a lottery team for five days, and everyone was like, we lost all the coverage. Now
Capture
the
the
Magic
flag.
are on a 6-game winning trip, holding every opponent they've won in the last 6 games to under 100 points, and we're back on top. Franz just won Player of the Week. So, how has your journey of believing in the Magic been in the last, 12, 13, 14 games into the season right now?
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster. I feel like every year now I get more and more excited for Magic seasons than I could ever remember. Obviously since like the Dwight days, and this was the one where this felt like the last season where it was kind of going to be like there aren't really super high expectations. Like we want to obviously improve on what we did last year, but like we're not kind of like championship or bust team yet.
Yeah.
It's still kind of like the fun vibes are still there.
We talked about a bit about that last time we met.
Yeah, and then, obviously, like, we're talking about all the preseason stuff, and I think, Russillo, House, and Bill on the over-unders pod all went over on the Magic, which I think it was like 47.5.
Yep.
All super bullish on the Magic, which does sometimes make me nervous when the national guys are like, oh, man, I'm all in on this team. But I didn't really disagree. Like, they're still like a young, hungry team, and I think the regular season matters to them, so I didn't disagree. Come out, that Paulo performance was unbelievable. I mean, I've got so many people texting me being like, dude, are you watching this right now? Like the first half alone was just unreal. And then it kind of like weirdly comes crashing down. And you're like, what is this injury? Like he seemed fine, and now all of a sudden, like he's just going to be out for a couple months. And how the hell are we going to score any points? Like that was definitely, and it did look poorly. I mean, I was talking to some of our gambling guys, and they're just like, man, Magic unders, you feel like they're going to be the absolute thing to crush going on out. But yeah, Franz is he's a franchise player right now. Like that's what I think. I mean, there's nothing good about Paulo getting hurt, but there was all the talk about how Franz, like, he couldn't shoot this. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I wasn't worried. Like I was a little worried about especially the 3-point shooting. I think everything else was fine, but just strictly that. And I was just wondering, did he lose his way a little bit? How's the fit? And especially after he gets the max contract, everyone's like, oh, is he worth that? Which is the stupidest question. Like you have to pay the guy. It's not even a question. Like you just do it. And it's just awesome to see, like, yes, we'd want this to be happening with Paulo too, but I'm just happy for Franz, man, because I've been like, I feel like Franz's guy since the beginning of time, and I've always liked the guy, and I've always believed in him, and like this is legit all-star level, maybe even all NBA level stuff that he's doing right now, and on both ends too. Like defensively, he's still just as great, but he's carrying the load on offense, and like he really is like, I mean, Jalen's been certainly better, but like he's really the only like main scoring option on the Magic, and to see what he's doing now, this is kind of beyond my wildest dreams. And it's almost just like, hey, what's going to happen when Paulo gets back? Like I'm not nervous, but I'm also just kind of interested to see what that's going to look like.
It's really interesting because, like, you mentioned like nothing good is good about Paulo being out, and I agree. The only caveat I'll say is like, I think Franz needed this time
boost
to like remember, shit, this is still like, I can still be aggressive, I can still be that guy. And I think, long term, like, we see this with new players getting traded to each other, new players getting drafted. Like it takes a season or two to kind of figure like chemistry and balance out sometimes. And I think hopefully this experience for both like Franz on court and Paulo watching Franz allows them to realize, cool, we got to figure out a way so we can both coexist really healthily that brings each other out, or brings the best out of each other, which I think we saw multiple times last year, but then we would see times where it was either one or the other kind of having that game. And, I'm hoping that this is helping everyone who's having to step up in another role long term be able to like fill their growth a little bit more as this team balances out. Like I think them figuring this out today is actually better than them if Paulo went out in the last half of the season, right? Because it's like they'll have more time, more runway in the regular season to kind of like figure out their chemistry a little bit more. It's pretty interesting. And you're right. I mean, like, dude, Franz is averaging, since the beginning of the season, 22 points a game, almost 23 points a game right now. His 3-point shooting is one of the best. It's almost as good as his sophomore year. It's at 36%, which his sophomore year was 36.1%. Like, it's really good and it's fun. So I'm excited about it. It's been a lot of fun to like, not only like you mentioned, his offense has been great. His defense has also been so good. Like, I think that is something that often gets under talked about with Franz, but like, dude, he's guarding the best players just as much as Suggs and KCP is, and he's doing an excellent job of it. His two-way playability is insane, and I don't know, like, can you think of any other players right now that are two-way like him that are guarding and scoring at this peak?
There's some Jaylen Brown there.
Yep.
Right. And, and I
That's
think
a good comp too,
Yeah. And I mean, as like the 1A, or I'm sorry, the 1B, because I don't think anyone's, I don't think anyone's going to argue that long term. But I think to your point, Franz, he seemed to get a little lost. There were times where it's like, my biggest critique, I feel like, of Franz of the last 2 years was like when he would get it going for like a quarter or something, like keep feeding him. Like, why? Yeah. Then he would just wouldn't get the ball for like 5 minutes, and it's like, why are we doing this? Like, this is like it should be a tag team effort with he and Paolo, and then obviously you throw in. So I mean, it felt like the ball was just like way too much Paolo dependent, and everyone else was like falling in line. Where it's like, this might be a good thing for Paolo, or for Franz to realize, like, I'm still at that level, and at times I can still take games over, and I can still demand the ball in big spots, and we could do this sort of together. Because I think, when you sort of resign yourself to like a secondary role, then you sort of limit what your own expectations are of what you can be as a player. And like when the keys are now handed over to you and you do this, it's like, no, I could do this. I belong here, and I deserve, whatever respect it is from my teammates, and not that the teammates don't have respect for him, but like, I just think this goes a long way in his mental psyche of like, oh no, there are times when like I need to take over. I can't just rely on Paolo to do all the offensive work. And like at times I thought like Jaylen Suggs was like more assertive offensively than even Franz was over the last like probably 18 months or so. I love Jaylen, but that's like insane to me because Franz is a better offensive player. That again, not a good thing, but like good things have come out of it, and I think
sure.
I'm just happy for him, man, because I was so annoyed with all of the people that are just like, oh, this guy's trash, or the 3-point shooting's trash. Like, I'm officially worried. It's like, I was never like worried about like whether or not he would be he's a really, really good NBA player, but it's like, is he gonna be a great NBA player? And right now he is a great NBA player.
I mean, he just won Player of the Week, for last week, and
his numbers are nuts. Like he's
27, up there with like 8 and 5 or something like that. 7 and 5. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I think so. I was looking at some stuff here. Hold on. So this is like since November 17th, Franz, one of only 8 players in the NBA, averaging 20 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, and 1.5 steals per game. That list is Steph Curry, De'Aaron Fox, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Harden, Jokic, Tatum, and Jalen Williams.
Yeah, like, I mean, some elite company right there. MVP company in there too.
So
it's kind of ridiculous. Steve, right before we started talking or hit the record button, you said you had a few things you wanted to get off your chest. Yeah,
it was mostly just the Franz stuff.
Okay,
because like you have to understand, like I'm on text threads and I love these guys. I'm on text threads with Bill and House and Russillo, less Russillo, but Bill and House. I mean, especially House loves to give me shit about Franz not showing up in the playoffs. And, is he actually kind of a fraud? And I just, listen, the playoff, the 3-point shooting performance, especially in game 7, I don't have an explanation for it. Like, it is what it is. But I don't think that's who that guy is. But you kind of got to shut up and take, you just got to take it because that's what it kind of was. And he kind of had the weird, summer with Germany as well. Like, the shooting just was a concern. And,
yeah.
I'm not gonna like text House right now and be like, hey man, look at the stat sheet. We'll give it a little bit more time, but I'm just happy we're in the right direction, man. Because Bill, like I think over the course of like 3 different podcasts consecutively was like, Franz, it was the wrong call to give him the extension, and then it was the right call, and then it was the wrong call again after he had the bad game 7. It's like, no, it's still the right call. It's the right call. It's the right call. And so yeah, I guess that's probably my number one, man. Like, just put some respect on Franz's name.
You're a much nicer person than I am, because I would have just sent the box score of like just Franz stat lines directly to House right after the game on the other week when we played Washington, because we know he's a Washington fan and that team is struggling. So
not great.
You're nice. You're nice. I would have been right there. It's been really fun to see his development, and I'm looking forward to continuing to see how this plays out. Like, I've been really excited about this road trip that they're on right now. We're recording this on Tuesday, November 19th. They just beat the Suns last night, and then they go play the Lakers and the Clippers, which, let's be real, those teams are healthier and better than most of the teams the Magic have played in this last 6-game stretch. And I'm looking forward to seeing how they actually stand up to these tougher teams. I'm thankful the Magic got the win, but I almost wish Phoenix was a little bit healthier because they are a better team. And I want to see these guys really perform. Like, the toughest center that Goga has had to go up against was Joel Embiid. And, he had his issues there, but it's like, I want to see him go up against these tougher opponents to see what he's really made of, and not just like the Jonas Valanciunas of Washington, right? Like, no disrespect, but like there's levels to this conversation. And that brings me to my next thing I want to discuss is, it's been all over the group chats and Magic Twitter that I've been a part of. And I'm sure you guys have you've had this conversation in your circle of friends, like the Goga versus Wendell Carter, like, just not that it needs to be a this versus that with it, but like, what are your thoughts with Goga playing right now? And like long term, when Wendell Carter comes back, it seems like he's getting a little bit closer to being, in playing time. He went from out to doubtful to this last game, which you would think is not just a check on the box and an intentional check on the box to show that he's made some progress. Like, what's your thoughts around like the starting center position long term for this team?
I've always been a Wendell guy. I've probably valued him maybe higher than most have. Everyone, I feel like, I remember when he was in trade talks at the end of like, the last trade deadline. And it was like, hey, Memphis was interested. There's a couple teams interested. I'm like, well, they're not just going to give away Wendell. He's on an unbelievable contract and he's a really good player. Like, why would they just give that guy away? And you get you're overvaluing your own players, which maybe is true. But I've always been a Wendell defender. I liked him when we got him in the trade. Not that I'm jumping off the Wendell bandwagon, but like, the Goga stuff's hard to argue against. Like, he's an incredible rim protector. They've gone on 2 winning streaks the last 2 seasons with him as like one of the focal points in entering the starting lineup. And my thing with it is, why does it? I mean, I know it's like sexy to be like, who's the starter?
Yeah, it's the dumbest conversation in the world.
Like, why can't we just play it by ear and see like what the matchups are? There are going to be games when we need Goga, and there are going to be games when we need Wendell more. And I think it's also like, who's healthy? Like, is J.I. healthy around him? Like, who? Because I think that helps Wendell certainly. If J.I. is not healthy, then like, yeah, you probably want some more defense and rim protection. Like, that's fair. So, and again, different centers, different matchups. Like, I am not that worried about it. I think it's a good problem to have, and like, I'd probably keep Goga because like, why would you stop a good thing? Like, let it ride. But I also am like, Wendell was the starter. I'm sure Mose is like, you shouldn't lose your job on an injury, and it's not like he was playing poorly. So I could see it both ways. I think it'll just ultimately play itself out in like whatever the matchup is. I'm not really that concerned about it.
I hope it plays out that way, because like last year, what we saw was Wendell Carter comes back and Goga went in the coffin until the next injury happened, right? And I feel the same way. I don't think Wendell Carter should lose his job. I think we'll see what happened last year, where he goes into the second unit for a couple games to just ramp back up, and then he becomes a starter again. And if he plays poorly, then that's a different discussion. But what I'd like to see more is Coach Mosley find ways when they're both healthy to play them together, and not just like Goga be on the bench, never touching the floor in meaningful minutes, because it's like Wendell Carter Jr., he can play the 4. He can play the 5. There's opportunity there. Mo Wagner, great scorer, but pretty bad defender most nights. Like,
I will say,
dependent. Let's throw him in that spot. I just feel like
the Mo Wagner thing's interesting, though. I'm like more concerned about that. Like, I love the spark that Mo gives the team, and everything you said is right. Like, the defense is kind of wildly inconsistent, but like, he does give you these like really energetic spurts that like kind of change games sometimes.
Totally.
And I'd hate to lose. Like, I'm almost more afraid to lose that than I am about the discussion of like who's starting. But it's probably a good problem to have, that you've got 3 of these guys that can actually all legitimately play like winning basketball. And again, I just trust the coaching staff to be like, hey, this is the best person, or this is the best situation for this guy, and whether you want to start whoever, I guess it doesn't matter. Like, what are the minutes, who's closing, that to me is more important. So like, I guess, and that again, that's going to be dependent on who you're playing and what the matchups are.
And I just like, I hope our coach is flexible enough with his mindset to be more matchup dependent and not just rigid in his rotations like I've seen in a couple of years past. Mo's funny, man. Like, I have a love-hate relationship with Mo. I typically think that most of the time I don't like him, but it's hard to argue that despite his defensive limitations, because he's outside of taking charges, I'm not really sure what he's good at defensively. Sometimes he gets some decent deflections, but like, his offense is very much needed in that second unit, particularly this year. You know, his efficiency, which I was a little bit worried about going into the season, has stayed pretty high, pretty good. And it's just like, you know, there's not too many guys in that second unit that can take the ball, put it on the floor, and get to the basket and do it with size. Most of those guys need someone else to help them get a shot, right? J.I. corner three or a cut to the basket. Anthony Black can kind of like create for himself, but we've seen that unit struggle, and that's why with as bad as Cole Anthony's been playing, they've still been like trying to give him like 5 to 10 minutes, 5, 6, 7 minutes here and there, just because they need someone to be able to like create for themselves and like. When the offense stalls, like have an ISO move or two that they can do. And Mo Wagner is like the only guy that can really do that on that second unit outside of Anthony Black. And like, even if he is not the greatest defender, he's at least trying, and like he'll get under people's skin. He hasn't done that as much this year, but like you still know,
Give it time.
The players, yeah, for sure. And like, let's go play Dallas again. That'll happen, I'm sure. But it's like, you need that in that second unit. He is that spark plug. And like, it kind of pains me to say this because I have not liked Mo Wagner for a very long time, but I am starting to really appreciate this season what he is bringing to that second unit, because we've lost so many other players that could kind of create for themselves. We had last year, we had Fultz, we had Joe Ingles, who wasn't necessarily a self-creator, but could create for others, where it's like, we don't even have a lot of people that can create for others on that second unit. So he's kind of like a necessary evil for that second team, for that second unit,
I love him. I know he's flawed, but one of the things that I talk about with the Magic a lot is like, they have this thing where, they could literally just win a game in like 8 minutes or a quarter just defensively, where they just completely put the clamps down and like, all of a sudden, like, they're up 20 and you haven't scored in however
4
many
minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Mo is like the opposite of that. Like, he comes in off the bench and he gives you this like random spark where it's like, wow, like he's like plus 10 in 4 minutes. Like, what's going on here? Like, he's all of a sudden he's just like carrying us offensively. He's got a dozen in 5 minutes, and that's rare. And I also think like there is value to like his bullshit, his getting under guys' skin, and he's just a pain in the ass to play against. And I do think there is value to that. I know he's not a perfect player, but I'd rather have that. Like, I think for talking second units, that's why the Goga thing is kind of interesting, because like you could argue that like he's more valuable, playing with the ones, but he's not really that valuable playing with the twos, because they need someone offensively like Mo. And like if Wendell is gonna start, for example, or get the boatload of the minutes with that second lineup, your backup center has to bring something to the table that's not just rim protection and like, obviously like anchoring a defense, because
and that's what Jay is for.
Yeah. So like I kind of feel like that's why Goga does sort of get put out to pasture a little bit when because again, that's just like second unit dependent, matchup dependent. And so I don't know, but I know what you're saying, and I agree with you, although I disagree. I think there's value there with him, and I it's just tough. Like, it's a good problem. I've said this for 2-3 years, 2.5 years. Like, the Magic are like kind of too deep. Like, they probably need a consolidation trade at some point, and we can talk about that if you want to too. But like, there's just kind of too many cooks in the kitchen sometimes, and like you're at some point you're going to have to consolidate this roster, because you're not going to play all these guys come crunch time in a playoff game or a playoff series.
Well, and they have a couple of guys that are like, I think we all came into the season hoping Cole Anthony would find that like consistency in his game, and he's been a pretty big disappointment. I think he'd be the first. I mean, he has said it. He literally said in a meeting or in a media session the first time he got a DMP that he's been playing like ass. So it's like, that's one player you can already kind of like look, okay, he's probably not on this team much longer. You got a couple of people at the bottom of the bench that could move, but you're also, there's got to be a consolidation at some point where we're going to lose a good player that is effective for us, but hopefully brings a better player to kind of just help balance some things out. And it might affect our depth a little bit, but we have the depth right now to where that should be okay. And depending on where in the lineup things get affected. You brought up consolidation trade. I wasn't even thinking about talking about that on the show. It seems a little too premature for me, but is there anything like that you've been thinking about that, just how this roster could shift and change a little bit going into the future?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Colin Sexton one is the one everybody talks about, right?
Yeah.
Utah is, and I'd be all for it. Depends what the package is, but I imagine it's not going to be like too insane to get him, and it's just like that kind of solves your bench score problem. So maybe that does help Goga play with the second unit a little bit more. Like if Colin Sexton is sort of lead, if he's just like the way better version of Cole Anthony, with all due respect to Cole. Because I don't think he's going to start. Like, I think he's just basically like a guy who can, like, help you not lose the second unit minutes. And
totally,
if that's reasonable to do, it seems like Utah is, in the capture the flag sweepstakes. So I don't know that they would be, trying to hold on to a guy like that long term. I mean, I think they've got Laurie and then
Danny Ainge, though. He's
a tough guy to trade with. Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, honestly, like I'm not afraid of like I'd be interested to know like what the player situation was. Like at this point, like I'm okay with giving up future assets and picks. Like this team is ready to go. Like I don't, even if you like lose the trade, like do you really lose it if you're like your team is just better off for it, even if you gave up a ton to get a guy like Sexton? Like I'm not that worried. Like I feel like everyone's been trying. I've gotten made fun of for like being kind of stubborn with this Magic roster and saying, I don't really want to make a trade, just kind of let the cake bake, see what happens. Whether it was, a number of different guys in the past that we could have potentially traded for. I've always been like, no, just kind of stay the course. This is kind of the year, this is kind of the time to be like, all right, like the East is like kind of weird right now. Like I think we like Cleveland, obviously Boston's still there, but like what after that? Like could the Magic make a conference final this year? Like, are they that good? And if that's the case, like if you have to give up assets to get a guy that you actually value and is going to make your team better, like I don't really care at this point. That's fine with me.
Well, they don't have a huge window to do it. Like they either kind of have to make that move this deadline or like in the off season, right? Because then Franz and Suggs contracts kick in. You have you're a year closer to Paulo's max coming into play, so it just gets a lot more, not impossible, but a lot more complicated to make that move after this summer. So, I kind of expect something like that to happen soon as well, soon as in this deadline. It's not going to happen December 15th when a lot more of the league becomes available and trade season opens up, but it'll happen sooner than later, I think. I hope it happens before the summer because it would be fun to kind of push this season a little bit harder and see what this team can do with an upgrade. And yeah, I don't hate the Colin Sexton idea. Like that's one of the first people comes to mind. Obviously Brooklyn's got a couple of interesting people too with, Dennis Schroeder. There's the Anthony Simons, which
Bill
I'm not
Schroeder.
Huge. Oh yeah, Schroeder's. I mean,
I don't really other than the German connection, I don't really get it. I think we've seen Schroeder in the NBA. Like I'm good.
He's fine. He's fine, but I feel like in another year or two, you'd be looking to replace him again.
Totally.
Because he's also a little bit older too. Well? If this was Schroeder as in like 4 or 5 years ago where he's a little bit younger, I'd be a little bit more interested, but he's kind of on the older side now. So I'm not like, I don't love that idea, but I also wouldn't hate it depending on what the trade would look like, right? If it's just kind of like trading salaries, like, okay, maybe that makes sense. If they want Cole Anthony, who's got a few more years, a little bit younger, and we can just do a swap, like, okay, try it. But I don't know if I'd go give up like real assets for him. Then you kind of have like the Anthony Simons, which is like that other player that could kind of fit into that, but it's just expensive. And I don't know. He'd be fun, but I also don't know if I like love him either. I don't know.
I'm not that into that. Who I don't even know how realistic this is, but I think Norman Powell would be a great guy.
Yeah, I would love him on this team, dude.
The Clippers, like they're obviously playing like all right. So I mean, who knows like what their actual ambitions are. I don't even know what that trade would look like, but he's like the perfect like second unit scorer who could just like catch fire and lift you up for a while. And I think he just signed an extension too, so he's probably owed a ton of money. And I don't even know. Again, the numbers might not work out, but that's like the profile of guy I'd be looking for.
He's super fun for sure. For sure. Let's talk a couple other people. How have you been feeling about Jalen Suggs? Kind of given this new. He played a bit of point guard last year for us, but obviously we can tell he's being asked to do more of it at a deeper level, right? That's been clear from day one with how this team has even talked to the media about their plans with Jalen Suggs and what they're asking him to do. How have you liked or not liked certain things that he has done on the floor this year?
I think, like defensively, I think I just saw a stat that was circulating. Like the Magic have, I think, the top 2 guys in both like on ball pressure and like wing defense, according to like the LeBron defensive metrics. And
yeah,
it's Suggs and Anthony Black who, on ball, who are just absolute menaces. And I think it was Franz and KCP as the wing guys that were 1-2.
I think so.
So like I'm happy with Jaylen, man. You talk about like the actual like heartbeat of the team. I'm not telling Magic fans anything they don't know, but I always tell this to people who like, don't fully understand the Magic or don't watch, game in, game out. Like when he's not in the lineup, like there's a noticeable intensity level drop. And so like I couldn't be more of a bigger fan of Jaylen. I think he is everything that you want and like what his role is. The shooting, the scoring is there. Like he's made all those kind of leaps. And to me, like he's like the perfect like number 3 championship player. Like he's just a winner. He doesn't care about the stats, although he certainly can put up numbers if you want him to at this point. And he's almost like Marcus Smart on steroids. Like I know that like has been in there, but I almost like trust him more than Marcus. Like I think he's a little bit less of a wild card, but like better defensively, even though I mean it's crazy that Marcus won Defensive Player of the Year. But I don't know. I can't speak highly enough of Suggs. Like he's a guy. It's crazy to think like that we were like kind of worried about him a few years ago, and to see where he's at now is like he's. I don't know that there is a more tenacious defensive player in the entire NBA. Really,
I agree with all of that. Like he plays with so much energy and heart. It's hard not to just see the value that he puts on the floor. I will say, not that this is. I'm not taking a jab at him. I think that he has been one of the players that has been affected the most with Paulo being gone.
Fair,
because there was so much more ball handling put onto him. Where it's like with Paulo, he was able to, that was like Suggs was never our point guard. He did definitely run plays and get things going for this Magic team, but ultimately Paulo was the point guard, right? Everything ran through Paulo. And with that kind of switching back to Suggs, it's just, I think it's been a little bit of a harder adjustment for him. And I'm hoping that in another week or so, it'll kind of balance out a little bit. Not that he's been bad, but I just think there's times when you can tell he's struggling to know what decision to make offensively with the ball in his hand. And
I'm okay with that though. Like
it's fine.
Like he has limited, like, that's all fair, but like big picture, like I'm not really that interested in asking him to do more on that.
Yeah.
Like if you get it eventually, that's great. But like
I think it's just growing pains.
The best version of this team like isn't really asking Jalen Suggs to like be a main facilitator.
No.
Like there's never going to be a true. I mean, he and Anthony Black like there's never going to be a true point guard on this team as long as and again like people talk about the turnovers in the playoffs with Paulo and like, oh, you need to get a real point guard. And I was just like, I don't know, let these guys figure it out. Like I'm okay. Again, I'm okay with the growing pains and the mistakes because I think you could see the forest through the trees of what you're actually trying to build, how you're actually trying to build this team. And like maybe this is a period where all right, let Suggs get a little bit more point guard experience, maybe a little more decision making experience. Maybe that could pay off long term. But at the end of the day, like if the ball is in Jalen's hands, that's not really where we want this team to be, like in crunch time spots, like it consistently at least. So I don't really, I know what you're saying, but I guess I don't really have any issue with that. And I'm comfortable with the way, even if it looks a little awkward right now, like I don't think it's really something I'd worry about.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I'm not worried about it either. I was just more pointing out, I think his game, I think it's been a little bit harder of an adjustment for him to find his balance in certain areas with running the team with the ball in his hand with Paulo being out, Mm-hmm. Ultimately, I think this is good growing pains for him to go through, and like he's going to be a better basketball player and decision maker with going through this stretch of basketball without having Paulo to be there, within that offensive system. He mentioned it in an interview like a week or two ago, is like the entire training camp, everything was based around Paulo, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. So it's been a huge adjustment for a lot of this team. And, we saw how hard it was for them to adjust on that 5-game road trip where they just looked awful. And now they're looking like their defense is still not great. Or, I mean, their offense is still not great, but they have the second best defense in the league, which I wouldn't be surprised if any game, in the next game or two, they jump to number 1 with because they're like neck and neck with OKC, which is pretty cool to see. Also kind of expected, I expected them to be a top 3 defense. So it's nice to see that they still are, despite losing 2 starting players and Paulo and Wendell Carter Jr. It's like,
it's funny to look at if you just look at like the raw, just, points for, points against stats, points per game. They're number 1 in points per game, defense. And they're third to bottom in points per game on offense, but they're still like, I think 6th or 7th in point differential. Like that's just how good their defense is. It's wild. Cause like any other team that couldn't score the way the Magic are would be a disaster. Like it'd be a disaster.
I mean, dude, they literally held the last 6 teams they've played to under 100 points. Like, it got close last night. They got 99, but it's like, it's in an era where offense is so prioritized and, it's their teams are scoring more and more points every other season. It's like, this is ridiculous. It's so cool. I'm just like, I was hoping in that like garbage last minute last time, like, don't get a stupid bucket, or Phoenix. Don't do it. I want to keep this streak going. We'll see what happens versus LA tomorrow. But yeah, it's been fun for sure. All right, I know we're starting to get close to time here, but I want to ask a couple more. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I think he's starting to find himself a little bit offensively. I know I think a lot of people forget who he was as a player, right? At least, the Magic community before he came here. It's like, this dude only averaged about 10 shots a game, if that, averaged about 10 to 12 points per game, and only took about 5 threes per game. Like, that's and brought elite defense. He wasn't ever this like high scoring guy. And obviously he started the season like dog shit, with his 3-point shooting. Like, there's no denying that. But I was looking at some numbers. I did the math. The last 3 games, he's shooting 38% from 3. He's hit 5 of his 12 3-pointers, 40% 3 games ago, 33% 2 games ago, and then 50% last night. Granted, last night he made 1 of 2, and then it was like 2 of 6, 2 of 5, like those types of numbers to help balance things out. But like, I'm hoping this is a runway to him continuing to find his shot and not being that 25% like 3-point shooter he has been, and getting back to his like season averages. Cause like outside of that, dude, he's doing everything else he's supposed to be doing, in my opinion.
Yeah, the defensive
defense is awesome. His passing, I didn't realize how good of a passer he was. Like, he's not going to get crazy assists, but every time he does pass the ball, I'm finding it in the perfect pocket of that player that is receiving it. It's like, it's pretty cool. It's pretty fun to see. What have you been thinking about KCP since, again, we're how many games into the season? I can't remember, but a decent amount of games into the season now. So we have a bit of a sample size.
I think people just sort of like forgot who he was as a player. Maybe like the Magic fans got excited because it was like, oh, we got this starter from the Nuggets, champion. Like, they know the name. Like, he's been around a lot of teams here and there. Let's be honest. This is a guy who, like, if he scored 0 points in a game, like, you wouldn't be surprised. Like,
yeah, totally.
He just that's who he is. Like, he could. Some games he'll have it, some games he doesn't, and it's an overpay. Like, it's okay. Like, it's fine. Like, I'm not like upset about the contract. I think we just have to be realistic about who he is as a player and like how they had to overpay him essentially to get him. Now, the inverse of that would be like Denver could certainly use a guy like him right now. Like, it's funny, like all the Denver fans being like, "Oh, he's washed. You guys are getting trashed," and it's like, Denver could use him right now. You guys would take him in a heartbeat if you could. I'm not. I think it's fine. I think if you're expecting him to like carry any sort of load offensively, I think you're just going to be disappointed no matter what. You hit the nail on the head. The defensive stuff is all still there. He's going to be good defensively no matter what. I mean, the idea is like, can he just be better than Gary Harris was last year in the playoffs? Like, can he be a better version of that? Can he knock down a few more big shots than he did? Like, that's the hope at least. And and the other thing too is like just veteran leadership. Like, I think that is valuable for a team like this that has so many young. I mean, Gary obviously is there too, but I think this is kind of a different level. NBA champion
twice.
Chose to come here. Believes in the project. So like, I just think Magic fans might have gotten a little carried away in like not understanding fully who KCP was, especially offensively as a player at this stage in his career. But I'm not worried, man. I think you're right. Like, I think there will be ebbs and flows. That's how feels like how his career has been, at least in the last couple of years. And if you're asking him to like carry an offensive burden, like, you're just going to be disappointed.
With this team, they're currently sitting. Where am I? Here I am. They're currently 9-6, sitting third in the Eastern Conference. They're also first in their Group A for the in-season tournament, which is cool, with a +37 differential. New York Knicks they both are 2-0, but the Knicks are a +14 in the differential. So there's a nice little gap there. How are you feeling about this team just kind of like through the rest of the season? They've had some changes with Paula being out, so I think we all kind of immediately adjusted our expectations. But now we've seen 2 massive swings, a huge losing streak now with a huge winning streak, players settling in a little bit. Have your expectations for this team changed today versus at the very start of the season, after Paulo dropped 50?
I think so, but not anything that is Magic related. It's more like what the East looks like. The East is, I think we all thought, hey, it was going to be Boston, and then it was going to be like 2 through, I don't know, 9 maybe. Because you're talking, preseason was like Cleveland, Orlando, the Knicks, who else?
Indy.
Indy, Miami, Milwaukee was in there, certainly. Philadelphia. And the East is like not even remotely what I think we would have predicted at this point in the season. So for me, like, I almost look at it like, and I mentioned at the beginning, like, is this kind of like a really good chance for you to get to a conference finals if Milwaukee's going to be this bad and if Philadelphia can't figure it out? And, I know, the Cavs look awesome right now, but the long season, we'll see. They've had kind of a soft schedule. I still think they're really good. That's no disrespect to the Cavs. Like, I think they are legit, but 15-0, like, they're not going to keep that up. The Knicks are still kind of feeling themselves out. Like, I don't, the Cat has been better than Cat deserves some credit. I think he's actually been better than I would have expected, but
better than Brunson half this time.
Brunson Bridges has been kind of weird like that. Who knows with Anunoby and his health. I really like Bridges, but he just hasn't the shot got changed, and so I don't know. Like, the Knicks, maybe they're not as good as, again, long season, but maybe they're not as good as we thought. So I guess my expectations have only changed because of what I think the East potentially could look like and how it's not as much of like a complete logjam in the middle. Because I'm like, I thought the Magic would win close to 50 games this year, but you never know. If they won like 47, 48, they could still find themselves in like the 6th seed. Right, because of how congested the middle of the East is and how bad we thought the bottom would be. And I don't think that's the case now. I think there's, I'd be really surprised if Philly and Milwaukee turned it around in a big way. I think that number 2, 3, 4 spot, that's where the Magic should be living. They should be getting a home court playoffs game, a series. I'm sorry, and hopefully things fall the right way and they can stay healthy the rest of the season. So I guess the team is who I thought they were going to be. The East is what's kind of changed.
I went through an emotional roller coaster with this question. The beginning of the year, I was like, all right, 4 or 5 seed. Because again, we thought Philadelphia and Milwaukee would be better teams than they are right now, right? I thought Indiana was going to be a little bit better than what they are right now. And it's again early. A week, a lot of this could look differently, right? Then Paulo goes down. I'm like, cool. Just be a playoff team, not a play-in team. If they can stay in that 6-7 range until Paulo gets back, float around 500, that would be great. And then get going. Now we're cool. We've won 6 games in a row. They have won 6 games in a row, and they're still in 3rd place in 3rd seed. And I'm like, was I being too naive to think they still can't be one of the top teams in the East without Paulo? I think I might have. Again, they've been playing some context. They've been playing some shitty teams and some very injured teams, but good teams beat bad teams. That's 101 basketball. If you're a good team, beat the bad teams. The Magic are beating the bad teams right now. It made sense that they lost 5 in a row. So now I'm back to they stay top 4, even if it's even if they drop to 5 at some point as this schedule might get a little bit harder, they face some harder teams. They'll lose a few games, I'm sure. If they stick around 5 until Paulo gets back around Christmas, hopefully, can they get back to home court? And I'm I kind of still think, yeah, okay, home court should be the goal. I agree with you on that. Knicks will probably figure some things out. I do expect at least one of the Bucks or the 76ers to figure something out, but how far down in the hole are they going to be to have to dig out to then climb up and catch one of these other teams? Indiana's been a mixed bag. I don't know. I mean, they're injured. I think Halliburton's overrated even before his Magic comments. It's
Indy is like that. Hey, you make the conference finals. It's oh, is this team? I don't know. I kind of think that was fluky. It's not I dislike. I like Halliburton. I like the team, but I'm is that really the waters that they should be swimming in? I don't.
Felt
think
like Atlanta that year they went to the conference finals.
Yeah.
It's okay, cool.
Or
the
you
did well.
Did that with Dame a couple years ago too. It's
they beat
that's
the
not
teams
really who
they were supposed to, but we knew it was there was a little bit of situational luck to that.
Totally.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. I'm excited. You catching any games this year? Did you go the game that Paulo was out earlier this season? Because I know you're based in
Oh, I'm in Connecticut. No,
Connecticut. Sorry, not Ohio. Connecticut.
Northeast. So I got to deal with going to one of the Gardens or Barclays Center.
Oh, that's right.
So I I have not been yet.
For some
I
reason, I
usually
thought
try
you
to
were
get
closer
to.
to Cleveland.
Oh no. I'm not. I was in Ohio for a wedding recently, but no, I'm not an Ohio guy. But yeah, like I like to. I try to get to I try to get to New York for a game at least every year. So I guess probably come in the spring. It's funny, we do a pod at the Ringer called New York with John Jastrzemski, and he's like a big Knicks guy. So I went with him and another producer a couple years ago, and my record going to Magic games is actually very stellar at the Garden, because the Magic had that good run where they like beat the Knicks a ton of times in a row, and I was at a couple of those games. So maybe I'll have to keep that rolling.
You got to keep that going. I think so. That they haven't really had that Knicks matchup yet, and hopefully they'll have a good one when you show up too later this season.
That would be a phenomenal playoff series, really. Like if it's like the Tibbs like Knicks and the Magic are these two just like hard nosed old school kind of 90s.
That would be fun.
That are just slugfesting it out. Like hopefully that's in like a the second round, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be a lot of fun. This team, they have a couple games coming up. They are playing back-to-back versus Los Angeles Lakers and the Clippers, and they're back home for the Pistons, kind of round out the week. I'm looking forward to it. Steve, I really appreciate you joining the show. Magic fans, make sure you tune in to Steve on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. If there's a Magic game going on, he's good for at least 1 to 4 tweets per game, and then a lot of soccer content in between.
Yeah. My Twitter feed is very strange. I have a lot of niche followers. It's like, why is this guy tweeting about the U.S. men's national team and the Orlando Magic exclusively? It's just kind of like a weird thing, but yeah, that's what I do.
It's a nice little pocket to have, The Magic have a lot of international fans. We're an international team, right? A lot of people come to Orlando.
Pochettino, the men's national team manager, was just at the Magic game. What was it, last week? A couple weeks ago?
Exactly.
A lot of those guys are there. So hey,
it's they got a lot of love. They just started. Didn't they just start a new international Instagram account for Germany? I think
makes sense. Probably long overdue. Yeah,
totally. It's like, hey, there's a lot of soccer fans internationally, football fans. Like they'll find your content good, I'm sure. Other than me, the only football that I follow is Wrexham because of the documentary series.
Oh yeah,
which is great. It's been fun. So.
Yep.
Magic fans, that's going to wrap up this show. Steve, thanks for hanging out with us today. I really appreciate it. Let everyone know where they can find you.
I'm at Ceruti, Ceruti on X, Twitter, whatever. Yeah, and Ron Russillo Pod, Bill Simmons, all the above. And then Ringer Soccer Show. We do a once a week soccer show. We just talked about the U.S. games last night. They beat Jamaica, advanced in the Nations League. So shout out to the U.S. They're actually fun to watch again, which is exciting. So that pod comes out once a week in the gambling feed.
Let's go. All right. That's another episode of The Close Up. We'll tune in next time. Peace.